Mike, and welcome visitors. How are you, Mike? Is it still snowing where you are?
It is a constant tension and struggle between snow and rain where I'm looking out my window here, Jeff. Is there a political metaphor there?
I don't know. Well, it'll soon be spring, and we'll see. Spring forward is what every politician hopes, but I'm not sure that's what happened to the premier last week. We'll see later in Strategy Suite, but we've got another great pod for you today. We think an interview with one of the leaders of BC's labor movement, someone whose members are deeply involved in our province's resource sector. And then we'll be off to Strategy Suite, of course, where we'll welcome an old friend, communications strategist Lesli Boldt, to break down the week's events, including but not limited to Premier Eby's bad news week about a new set of agreements Canada has signed with the Musqueam Indian Band. What did he know? When did he know it? When should he have told us? The first probable case of deepfake AI shaking up BC politics in the Vancouver mayoral contest. And what can we expect at the provincial level as AI gets deeper and deeper into the political bloodstream?
How can
Uh,
I
the,
know you're real right now, Jeff?
well, you just have to take my word for it.
Okay.
You can tell by the glitches.
I think you're chat Jeff makes is what I think.
Yeah, a lot of people have accused me of that. The Conservative leadership race is building up ahead of steam, and a lot of people are saying they are Aaron Gunn's best friend. We'll see if we can break out who is. Oil prices are shooting up. It looks like that means Alberta's deficit will be coming down, but what about BC impacts? Should David Eby have kept the carbon tax, and would anyone notice? But first, our guest. Our guest today is someone with deep roots in BC's resource economy. As Director of District 3 of the United Steelworkers, he's responsible for the union's work in all of Canada's three western provinces and three northern territories. In 2021, Scott Lenny was elected to that post after a 30-year career in the union that began with a degree in industrial relations from UBC and then 10 years as a national staff rep, communications officer, and researcher with the Industrial Wood and Allied Workers of Canada, the IWA, where he learned every aspect of collective bargaining in the forest industry and spent a lot of time working on forest policy. In that role, he was in union organizing and bargaining, as I mentioned, legislative campaigns, and he was directly involved in 2004 when the IWA merged with the Steelworkers and went on to leadership roles in the Steel's Wood Council, eventually rising to the leadership of District 3, which has 50,000 members. So Scott's no stranger to politics. He served 5 years as vice president of the BC NDP, in addition to his membership on the executives of both the BC Federation of Labor and the Alberta Federation of Labor. And he even hosts a podcast for steelworkers, which he tells us is going to threaten our position as a podcast for Western Canada. So we're watching out for that. But where are the steelworkers in the BC economy? You can find them in most sawmills in BC and many mines, including Highland Valley Copper, in the smelter at Trail, and in many other private sector businesses. So, Scott, welcome to Hotel Pacifico.
Thank you, Jeff and Mike. I'm glad to be here. I was saying before I've become a bit of a fan, so I'm kind of excited.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you find your way into the labor movement, and what has kept you so involved over such a long and illustrious career?
Yeah, I have a bit of an unusual path, I guess, into the labor movement. I got hired while I was still getting my commerce degree at UBC as a kind of like an intern, like a student intern, a paid intern. Of course, it was the union, and it was the
Commerce degree.
yeah,
Commerce
and
degree.
I was the best paid intern, by the way, working for a union, opposed to the folks that went into the corporate side. And I got hired on and to do some research work, and it fulfilled part of my fourth year of my degree. And I I had other plans prior to that, but I ended up sticking around and doing some really interesting stuff. As you sort of mentioned, Jeff, did a lot of work in the forest industry, particularly the coastal industry that it was in this is like 1994. So, less than 10 years prior to that, there'd been a big strike about contracting out. So there was a lot of, a lot of stuff going on around contracting out, things like that. And so I got to traipse around the coast of BC and hang out with Vince Reddy and folks like that, which kind of makes you feel like
Hmm.
you want to stick around and do stuff. A lot more interesting than going back to school or working in an office. So I did that and sort of it wasn't great times for the IWA. There was some challenges in in the late 1990s as well, in terms of markets and employment. And I was kind of one of the few staff standing the into the 2000s, when we were looking for a better way to do things with a bigger union, and we ended up merging with the steelworkers at that point, which was another kind of quite exciting thing to sort of become part of something a lot bigger than, as big as the IWA was, becoming a part of the steelworkers union with, as you mentioned, a lot of different sectors and things like that, was another exciting thing. And I did my time doing the things in the steelworkers, and never thought I would be the elected guy. I was always a bit of a behind the scenes. I did, as you said, research, communications, like helped out the executive and worked for the presidents and things like that. But here I am. So,
But there have been some storied leaders of the IWA in the past, like Jack Monroe and
yeah,
Dave Haggard.
yeah.
Do you swear as much as those guys?
My staff guy told me I'm allowed to swear on this podcast. We certainly swear on the
Yeah.
Strongest Steel podcast. I want to tell you that.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Don't worry. We're not afraid of
yeah,
it. We're not afraid of
but
swearing.
it's a different it's a bit of a different environment these days. There's a little less swearing, but not no swearing in the union. You mentioned Jack Monroe. I came on right after Jack Monroe had retired when I started with the IWA, and he had gone. And I don't know, you guys might know this, but I mean, I grew up in BC. Jack Monroe was like a legend, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and he had just retired, and he had gone to do I think it was called the BC Forest Alliance, and it was kind of
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, and it was kind of like a lobby group for the industry, and he was in ads for the coast hotels and things like that. And so, had fallen out of a little favor at the IWA shop, for kind of going off and doing other not union type things. And I didn't know that, so I go into my interview as a fourth year university student to get hired on, and I had dutifully read Jack's book, and I knew all the things about Jack Monroe. I knew little else about the IWA other than Jack Monroe, and I spouted off for like 20 minutes about Jack Monroe, and then a guy named Terry Smith, big guy, said, "We don't really talk about Jack anymore. You know anything else about the IWA?" I still got hired anyway, so I guess that's the good news. But I
Well, the
kind of felt like
IWA,
an idiot. Yeah.
I mean, in those days, the IWA was the largest, tied with the BCGU for the largest numbers of members in
Yeah.
BC. But you can't stay large if the industry is not large. And now the wood section for sure is smaller. But how many members does steel have in BC at this point?
Active members, maybe 28,000 ish in
Hmm.
BC in all the sectors. It's I think just under 10,000 in the wood sector, probably 6,000, 7,000 in mining. We represent some Telus employees, and then after that, it's a mix and mash of different manufacturing and all sorts of other sectors
And
and
you're
smaller
still,
employers.
still, I mean, have always been and remain an international union with your headquarters in the United States. But
Yeah.
two of the most important leaders of the United Steelworkers internationally have come from Canada. Most recently, Leo Gerard, who
Hmm.
had spent a lot of time in BC, was although he's from Ontario. What are the advantages and disadvantages, do you think, of that relationship, particularly when you have this forest situation and then the trade issues coming from the American side, not from the union on the American side, but how does it work?
Yeah, the other one is Lynn Williams, who's the
Lynn,
first
right? Yeah.
Canadian, yeah, who was who I had the privilege of meeting before he passed a number of times. Also, the opposite of Leo, I think, in terms of personality and swearing and outspokenness, but equally a great leader. I've been really proud to be part of an international union with the most recent stuff, all the Trump stuff and things like that, because there's a lot of we always talk about solidarity, but there's a lot of unity across the border, and with our U.S. counterparts. Not all of the members are politically aligned. With in the States, it's a bit even more I don't know, even more divisive than any of our politics ever get. But the leadership certainly is, we're looking out for workers, and we see the value of being an international union. We see the value of trade and in North America, and the work that's done on both sides of the border to support support our industries. And so, we've been able to, be able to speak with a louder voice, I think, because we're an international union, particularly recently. But there's just so much that we do, even outside of North America, globally, that you need to have the strength and the reach of a bigger union, of an international union. And it's really one of the best things we did was the merger uh, with the IWA and some of the other mergers we've done, because it also puts us in so many different sectors, so that we're we're able to keep the boat afloat, the finances and things going, even when different sectors are struggling, like some of them are right now, like our steel, aluminum, lumber industries, are under massive pressures right now, just because of Trump and the trade issues.
Yes. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about the Government of Canada's Buy Canadian policy and BC's Look West strategy, and why presenting sponsor Telus is advocating for a stronger definition of what it means to buy Canadian that will put homegrown Canadian businesses first. But supporting Canadian businesses doesn't mean shutting out the world. Canada should continue to welcome and encourage foreign investment. That's why Telus is advocating for tiered definitions of Canadian and sovereignty, which place the highest priority on companies headquartered and controlled within Canada, while still being inclusive of foreign companies with a presence here. A tiered system achieves multiple goals at once. It encourages foreign investment, which strengthens our economy. It ensures Canadian businesses get priority so that we continue to invest in ourselves. And it doesn't penalize Canadian companies that grow beyond our borders. It's about getting the balance right and fine-tuning the policy so that Canada stays open for business, while ensuring that truly Canadian and BC companies get top priority.
Well, on the forest sector, my father-in-law was a logger in Jordan River, and I know from living on the island, as many people do today, what an impact the forest industry's had on many of those communities that would self-identify as forest-dependent communities over the years, like Port Alberni and Duncan and Campbell River. But it's been tough. It's been tough on the coast, and it's in the interior too. But what's what's the impact on your union and on union leadership when you're going through a kind of what seems like an inexorable decline of the industry, which obviously is impacting jobs and union membership? And it must be hard to maintain optimism or try to get the pendulum to swing in the other direction. Because at the end of the day, you're hoping that people have paychecks.
Yeah, for sure. And I like, one of the things that we do that, or we try to do is just keep at it. And, I have all the kudos in the world for our local union leaders who were just lobbying in Victoria last week again, on forestry issues, that they haven't just thrown up their hands and, just, regress to shouting at people, that they're still trying to put forward, solutions and positive suggestions to stabilize the industry and build it back up. But yeah, it has been, look, I've been around a while, and it's always been a crisis. Like, the coast has always been a crisis. Actually, mentioning the coast, Mike, like, it seems
Yeah.
like there's always a crisis in the industry. I remember, like I said, when I started in the early 90s, we'd just come out of like a challenging late 80s. There was a recession, membership was down. One of the first things I was doing is making graphs about how much the membership had declined, since the peaks in the early 80s to early mid 80s to the mid 1990s, right? And it seems like that's been a project. It was a project in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was a project in the 2000s, early 2010s, and it's a project again to track the decline of the industry. And it
But it
is
seems
very
it's really
frustrating.
like
It is very frustrating.
it's
Yeah.
even more
So,
profound, it seems now, because I mean the harvest level is probably half of what it was about a decade ago.
mhm.
And so what do you think's the way out on that?
Oh, geez. Well, the challenge is, there's a lot of challenges, and um, I think there's the system of forestry, that we have is based on HR McMillan and the big integrated forest companies
Mm.
and volume based harvesting, and I think we have to finally, like, change that. And I think there's, some steps being taken to move to more regional area based harvesting. But the fiber supply thing is, I think it's just under 30 million cubic meters last year, and it's the AAC, which has not been reset for a while because of one of the other issues, which is data. Like, we don't have the right data, which is outrageous to me that we don't have the right data in the province about what's available and what can be harvested and where, and we're not all on the same page with that. So that has to change. And then we have to stabilize the fiber supply. And I think it's cost-effective fiber supply too. It's not just fiber that's available to be harvested. We have to make sure it's cost-effective for whoever's harvesting and able to get it into mills. But the other real challenge, and we can list all the little things. There's been trade issues since the early 80s. There's been environmental protection kind of issues, mostly recently old growth strategic review. There's been fires, there's been mountain pine beetle. There's you can list all of those things, but the real challenge has been the short-sightedness of all of the solutions that get put forward, and politics, really. Like, people are looking at some sort of immediate tinkering that they can do or fixing that they can do to forest policy to make everything right, and nobody's got it right in my time. It wasn't right in the 90s, it wasn't right in the 2000s, wasn't right in the 2010s, and it's not right now. And we need to fix that with a sort of longer term strategic view
Scott,
of the industry.
It sounds like you're trying to redesign forest policy to reflect a new reality in terms of harvesting and so on. In other words, there aren't the big integrated forest companies, and markets have changed. The American problem seems to be with us forever. But I've been criticized by some listeners by saying we're at a stage where we now don't have the volume of trees we used to have, that pine beetle, wildfire, plus harvesting have all reduced the amount that's available. And they say, no, actually, it's a regulatory problem and there's too much consultation with First Nations, or that's slowing everything down. Is there one side or the other of that argument you fall on, or is it everything?
I think I mean, one of the things you learn about the forest sector is it's really complicated. Like, there's a lot of easy slogans, like we used to always say ban log exports. Like, that doesn't really fix everything. Or, bring back appurtency. I don't know that that's going to fix everything. I think there's lots of,
you just use appurtency. Can you just explain for
oh, good God, how long do we have? How long do we have? So I think appurtency is a real estate term, really. Like, I think, but in the context of forestry, it's the notion of tying harvesting of crown lands to manufacturing, and it's existed since. I think it's existed since like 1912 was the first form of appurtency. If you go way back, and it always existed in the Forest Act until the early 2000s. But I think some of that nostalgia isn't helpful. I think you're right. I think what we're saying is, like, let's redesign the forest sector for the long-term future, not for and it's frustrating to people. Like, they want to fix right now, but we're not going to get a fix tomorrow. We need to get the harvest, the AAC at a level that's actually stable, that's actually realistic, that's economic to harvest, stabilize that, allow the sawmilling, the primary industry, as we say, to build off of that. And then you can start talking about value added and doing different things with fiber. And there's lots of technology and ways to get more out of the land base. I mean, I think it's certainly true that there's less economical timber available, and that's the reality of how we harvested in the past, but also wildfires and mountain pine beetle and other things that have.
Well, I was interested in one thing you raised in Victoria at this lobby, and lobbying sounds these days like hiring a consultant who goes and whispers in the ear of a minister. But when the union goes and lobbies, it's the membership going and meeting with members of all parties and talking about solutions. One that struck me was a jobs commissioner, which in the past was a specialist who went in with the backing of government to try to fine tune the context that a particular mill was in to save those jobs. And you're proposing that there be such a person or commission now. How many jobs do you think we might be able to recover from mills that were on the bubble but fell on the wrong side? Is there hundreds of jobs, thousands of jobs that we might get back that way? Because it certainly worked in the past. I saw it myself.
Yeah. I mean, the example that our folks were speaking to last week is Golden. Like, there's still in Golden, BC, there's still a mill today. It makes some kind of engineered wood products. It was a sawmill back in the I can't, sometime in the 90s when the Job Protection Act existed and there was a Job Protection Commissioner, and they sort of pivoted that mill into some, doing some different things, and everybody, as they say, took a bit of a haircut, like hydro and, the stumpage and, the union and the community, and to allow it to pivot, and it started making different products. It got bought by Louisiana Pacific, which is a big US company, ran for years. I forget who owns it now, but it's still running. There's like 300 people work there, and good union members with pensions, and that was a mill that could have gone, and in a place like Golden, that's a big deal, right? As you know. So I don't know. Houston is the example that, just like makes me mad. I know I shouldn't be mad on your podcast, but like the Houston
Please be mad.
closure
ahead.
really pissed us off because, I remember when the Houston mill that Canfor closed a few years ago was the best mill in North America, maybe the world. Like, it was brand new, and it was, it was state of the art, and
That's right.
and that's a big deal to a place like Houston to have that big mill, and there's still a timber supply there that's still harvested and goes to other mills, and I think that's where a job protection commissioner should have gone in, could have gone in before the place closed, and really made a deal that stuck. I mean, as you may recall, Canfor said they were going to do something and didn't do it, that really, it really upset the union, really upset the workers, and and I think really rightly upsets the community in the region who see the trees, maybe not leaving the province, but they're leaving their part of the province to go somewhere else and support manufacturing jobs somewhere else. I mean, that's not the first time Canfor's reneged on a deal. Jeff, you might remember this. They made it when the Eburn mill closed back in the when Glenn Clark was the premier. There was a deal for them to finally allow that mill to close, and they were going to open another mill.
Well,
I think a secondary mill somewhere, and the deal was they would hold on to their timber supply on North Island if they opened another mill or built another mill somewhere, and they never did that either. So.
Well, speaking of Glenn Clark, which we like to do on every 3 minutes on this podcast, I mean, I think I'm not even sure if he still is on the board of Canfor, but I mean,
No,
he has
hasn't
been.
No,
been
I
for a
think
little
he's
while.
off. He's off now.
He's off now. But I mean, I'm just to make the point that that there are economic realities that obviously businesses are facing too. So to your point, perhaps a jobs commissioner can help, bend the economics a little bit to make it more viable. But I'm also curious about. I know it's not your members that were involved, but I'm thinking of the example of Harmac in Nanaimo, which was at death's door about 10 or 15 years ago, but came out of it through an employee equity model, and to this day, I believe is still viable, and the employees have ownership of the mill. Do you see that as a potential pathway in certain properties around British Columbia?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do, Mike, and I think again that's where a job protection commissioner, like somebody that could come in and like help folks explore all the options, is really, we think is really necessary and really important. And it doesn't have to be a huge bureaucracy. It just needs somebody to come in and say, "Whoa, hang on a second," before we make the decision. They're usually pretty irreversible decisions to close down major manufacturing facilities and sawmills in particular. Like, they don't often come back. The occasional one does, but that's where that is. And maybe it's an option in some cases, maybe it's not. I mean, that's we've been involved in the history of the IWA and the steelworkers in some of those. I don't think it's the solution all the time, and maybe there isn't solutions to keep some of the mills running, and maybe the economics just don't work, or whatever the case may be. But I think we're not exploring that enough. And what it really does, in our view, require is somebody to come in and have the force of I don't know, government in some way, or the legislature, or the Premier's office or whatever. I don't care. I can't remember the Jobs Protection Act, how it was actually structured, but I think the commissioner reported to the legislature about their activities, and just say, hey, we gave this the best shot we could, because as you know, those mills sustain like whole regions of the province, right? When you lose the mill in somewhere, it has a huge spin-off effect, right? And so it impacts the community. Yeah.
With spring right around the corner, our sponsor Fortis BC wants to make sure you're ready for yard work. Public safety is the #1 priority for our sponsor Fortis BC, and raising awareness of the importance of safe digging is one of the ways they keep their customers safe and minimize potential service disruptions. That means clicking or calling BC One Call before digging or any other active ground disturbance, even for something as simple as planting shrubs, gardening, or building a fence. BC One Call is a free service that provides location details of utility lines in the area an individual is looking to work in, ultimately reducing the risk of accidental damage. Approximately 90% of damages to Fortis BC's gas lines are preventable when BC One Call is contacted in advance and the required safe digging practices are followed. Residents and contractors can contact BC One Call by visiting their website www.bc1c.ca, that's BC the number 1 c.ca, or calling 1-800-474-6886. Fortis BC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast. Does it annoy you when you look at the BC budget and see the amount of money? Now I'm going to channel my inner Don Wright here. When you see the amount of money that goes to film subsidies for the film industry, where we basically pay them for each job.
Yeah.
And the forest industry arguably doesn't get anywhere near that type of consideration from government. Is that something you look at and say, we need to have government get more active in supporting this industry?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And it also makes me mad when I see all the money that goes into, battery plants in Quebec and Ontario and and saving the auto sector. Like, there's more direct employees in the forest sector in Canada than there is in the auto sector, but nobody's talking about, protecting the forest sector across the country to the same degree they're talking about protecting the auto sector. And the other thing that the forest sector does, what I said again, is it anchors whole communities. Like it really is an anchor industry in a lot of rural and northern communities in not just in BC, actually, like, shockingly, there's a decent forest sector in northern Alberta and northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba as well, and all through northern Ontario and certainly in Quebec, right?
Every province, every province, yeah.
And then I was going to say, in Atlantic Canada has got a whole different kind of forest sector, but it's vibrant as well, and it's often in smaller communities, and it's not viewed in the same way that like the auto industry is, or these national nation building projects, because there's it's not a big project anymore. There's a sawmill, and there's some logging contractors, and then there's some of the chips are going to the pulp mill, and there's maybe a remanner that's buying some of the lumber or whatever, and I do think there needs to be more, I don't know, intervention from the government. Subsidies becomes a challenge every time we do something. The Americans claim that we've subsidized the lumber industry. So, I'm not sure we want to just do stuff that's called a subsidy, but I think we need to put a lot more attention into keeping the mills open. Like, we put a lot of attention into transitioning folks out of the forest industry and out of those communities. I think we got to keep them in those communities and keep them doing something in the forest sector, and that will allow us to position all the things that everybody talks about in terms of value added and mass timber and different things that we should have been doing for the last 50 years.
Well, despite the hard times, Scott, my understanding is there's still about 44,000 direct jobs in forestry overall and 100,000 indirect jobs, billions contributed to GDP. I mean, you've just been in Victoria. What's the one thing BC should get right next? And it seems like there's even a debate whether or not there should be a permanent forest advisory council. But when you came away from Victoria, were you feeling optimistic, worried? How did the
No,
government
no,
respond?
yeah, we were optimistic, and about how we were received, and that is one of the things we're talking about is a permanent sort of forest non-political kind of forestry council or sector council that would, advise on strategy. But the one thing, really is we got to stabilize the fiber supply right now so that there's a basis to build all the rest off, right? And so that is one of the biggest things that needs to happen, and there's some work being done on that, and it just it's, I guess, not fast enough. We've been talking about the path to 45, and I don't know where they got 45 million cubic meters, but it sounds good to us that it's more than 30, and it's I think we realistically know it's not going to be 60 million cubic meters, but stabilizing it at a good volume, and then we can work on the longer term stuff. I really hope that the work that the government's doing on some legislation in this session is going to be a bit of a rewrite of the Forest Act to, like we said earlier, like you mentioned earlier, really what we're calling for. And I think other folks are calling for, and I think there's a lot of agreement, is like, let's design forest policy not based on our favorite provisions of the past, but let's base it on where we're at today, how we can stabilize the sector, and then how we can start to grow and build the industry around that stable amount of fiber that's being harvested. I think First Nations play a big role in that. But you mentioned it earlier. There's a challenge. The forest landscape planning tables that they're talking about are taking way too long to get going, and that's something we've said for a long time. Like, let's move away from volume-based harvesting to area-based harvesting, in regional area-based harvesting, and I think the forest landscape planning tables are intended to do that and to be able to stabilize the fiber supply and allow the industry to build around that. It's just taking way too long. I think they keep saying there's 15 stood up, but only one of them is actually completed or even near completion. So, that's a real challenge. It's not that it's the wrong thing to do. It's just not happening quick enough.
So let's take a turn to politics briefly, because you're a New Democrat, and your union has been associated with the NDP and supported the NDP organizationally for many, many, many years. But it's probably fair to say your members, large numbers of your members, are attracted to the Conservatives and voting Conservative based on how we saw some of the election results the last time around. Conservatives are trying to make a big play for blue collar workers. How's that playing out in your membership? And do you think the NDP is able to make an appeal to members like yours, workers like yours, or is it in trouble on that front?
Yeah, that's a big question. But
Sorry,
there's a
several
lot,
questions.
there's a lot of push and pull in the union, right? But when we're talking about the resource sector workers, I think you're right. They're, because they're largely not in, Metro Vancouver. A bunch of them are on the island, but they're not in places that are, you would say are NDP sort of strongholds these days.
Well, you can see all the Elk Valley votes, for instance.
Yeah, and so there's a real challenge there. I think, like, we had a good meeting last week. Our folks had a good meeting with the Conservative caucus, and they said all of the right things minutes before they introduced a bill to not have project labor agreements or community benefit agreements ever in construction, because it's unionized workers and high wages is just too costly and make it difficult. So I think they struggle ultimately appealing to the union and the leadership of the union and a lot of the activists in our union, regardless of how they might feel about things otherwise, because they're just not and haven't been very pro labor, pro union in the sense of dealing with and talking to and listening to their union, right? And so we've got a lot of folks that view things from a union perspective, and so I think it makes it difficult to fully attract our folks to the Conservatives. But that's always been the pull in the resource sector, is from an NDP lean on one side to a Conservative lean. Like, there's not a lot of liberals in the mines and the mills. like traditional liberals, like federal
Yeah, yeah.
liberals. I know, Mike, you've got a different view of liberals, but yeah.
No, I'm very much a pro resource. You can call me whatever you want, but in that, just to follow up the point though on how the Venn diagram works in politics now. I mean, in a lot of these debates are around political debates are around how we use natural resources, and it does kind of lend itself to a bit of a right-left split, with the more conservative-minded parties tending to be more supportive of resource extraction. And now we see the EB government is, I would argue, found religion in the last year or so on things like LNG, and certainly evangelical fervor when it comes to mining. Um, how do you see these growth areas for your membership, mining in particular, going forward? I mean, while forestry is, obviously has its challenges, you've got other areas that maybe you can grow your membership.
Yeah, I mean, the mining critical mineral space right now, Mike, is booming, and it appears to be, even more of that moving forward. It's great. I mean, we've got hiring going on in most of the mines that, if not all the mines that we represent in BC, and from the coal mines in the Elk Valley to Highland Valley Copper, which is in a big expansion. The Red Chris mine up north is going underground and has got a significant expansion. Mount Milligan's got an expansion. So there's a lot of potential in the mining sector, and it's already showing sort of increases in our membership. I mean, the real challenge, it is a real labor market challenge. There's a real difficulty attracting folks to and retaining folks in the sector. I mean, we've been really advocating for a more holistic industry approach, province-wide industry approach. We take the same position in Manitoba, which is also looking to really expand mining. That there should be more industry approach to mining training, like pre-employment training, even programs where we can, prepare people to be in the industry and prepare them to be, to stay in the industry once they, so they know what they're getting into, but also that they're going to be safe and be able to do the job effectively and efficiently. I mean, there's something, I think there was 3 fatalities in our mining sector in December, January-ish. And that's a challenge if we're going to build a critical world-class mining sector, which we already have, and expand it and be the source of critical minerals for folks. We got to be able to do it not just efficiently and productively, but also safely, and make sure that we're looking after the folks and the environment as well as doing the work that's being done to engage First Nations. But I think that we're doing the right stuff in BC around critical minerals and mining, and it's a real positive. And I actually think it's the federal NDP, not to get back into politics, that has been the drag lately on our folks, believing that the NDP is pro-industry. Like, it's not been the provincial sections of the NDP that have not been or that have been anti-industry or viewed as anti-industry. It's been the federal party and a couple sort of distracting disputes about a particular northern pipeline. But other than that, it doesn't
sound like you're a big fan of Abby Lewis.
Yeah.
What I'm reading out of this.
It's a secret ballot vote, Mike, but yeah. You can take a guess. Yeah. So I think there's some real opportunity. And I think you're right. I think the provincial, like David Eby, has done better on that front than I think people, my folks would have expected in terms of promoting particularly the mining sector, but industrial growth. I mean, the real challenge has been the forest sector, as we were talking about. And I don't think that, like I said, I don't think anybody's been right about the forest sector and their policy in my lifetime. And I don't think anybody's completely wrong. I think we have to sort of get a longer term strategic view. And I think there's a lot of appetite for that. So,
well, thanks very much, Scott, for coming in and sharing your views. I'm sure Premier Eby and Brenda Bailey would love to see the forest industry double its current size, given the contribution that would make to the budget and all the difficulties they face on that front. So we certainly look forward to seeing some turnaround in that neighborhood. Mike and I both understand how important it is to to the future of the province. So thanks so much for coming in and sharing your views, and good luck on getting some further progress on increasing that fiber supply.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it.
We'll forever call you Brother Scott here at Hotel Pacifico.
That's good. Thank you. I already call Brother Geoff, but I don't know if I can get there with you, Mike, but I'll try. I'll try. Yeah.
Cousin Mike, maybe? Cousin Mike?
Cousin Mike, yeah, that's right. Okay, take care. When wild salmon return, coastal communities and economies thrive. By transitioning away from Pacific ocean-based salmon farms, we can rebuild salmon runs and restore the health of our waters, reviving ecosystems that coastal communities rely on, bringing back tourism, expanding local business, and generating thousands of good year-round jobs across coastal regions. And we can create new opportunities with future-focused industries like modernized land-based aquaculture that protects wild salmon, strengthens food security, and supports workers and families. That's according to our new sponsor, Wild First. For them, it's essential nation-building work, built in partnership with First Nations, that will unlock long-term economic opportunity and attract global investment to Canada's coastal industries. Let's secure a strong, sustainable coastal economy for generations with the wild salmon economy. Wild First. Let opportunity flow. Visit wildfirst.ca. Okay, well, thanks again to Scott Lenny.
Stranger in the gallery. Stranger in the gallery.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Welcome, Lesli Boldt.
Hello.
Strategic
Nice to
Communications Advisor to Mini. Welcome to the Strategy Suite. Thanks for joining us this week. Mike, you wanted to tell us about a poll that just came
My
in.
former colleague, Leslie, I should add.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, that's right.
We were legislative interns together we won't say what year it was. It's during the Harcourt administration.
That's correct.
It was a while ago.
I think I introduced you to. Am I right about that?
You introduced me
correct.
to.
Yeah.
You introduced me to Geoff. That's right.
That's right. That's right.
You are in effect the founder of Hotel Pacifico.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
welcome.
In fact, it was a meet cute because I wanted to get my Jeff Meggs book autographed by Jeff
That's
Meggs.
right.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah.
The Dave Barrett book. The Barrett book. Yeah.
Barrett
What's
book,
it called,
right.
Jeff? The Art of the Possible? Is that right?
Yeah.
Little
Art
plug
of the
for
Impossible, isn't it?
your book. Art of the Impossible.
The
Art of the
Impossible, correct.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
forget which. Depends on what day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting read. Internet.
They got it done.
Check it out. So I saw a poll.
Now, what did it say?
Innovative Research Group, who I used to work for. I've worked in a lot of places. Which is the first poll that's come out that's had the BC Conservatives in a significant lead. Provincially came out 47-39 for the Conservatives. So get used to this phrase, Premier Trevor Halford. Should the government fall, the Halford administration will commence. There's a lot of BC Conservative leadership candidates that are having a little heart fibrillation when they hear that. But anyways, the long and short of it is there is a poll out. It's 600 interviews, which is okay. Not the biggest sample in the world, but there could be something there. Where there's smoke, there might be fire. But it's definitely
a reputable firm, Mike, right? It's not one of those firms which we
once
won't
it got
name.
rid of me, yeah, it was reputation went way up. But as is the case with Greg Lyle's surveys, there's usually a lot of depth to the analysis, and there's a lot that shows actually what people's sentiment was towards the premier during the week before the budget, which, as you may recall, was the Tumbler Ridge unfolding, which was largely positive towards the premier and his I wouldn't call it a performance, him undertaking his duties that week. And then the budget aftermath is not good. So, Greg's linking the budget to the weakness in the polling numbers there. So I will just put a little pin in that topic and just say more to come, I'm sure. But if it's is this the beginning of a trend or is this an episodic blip? We shall see.
I just have to remember a previous pin that was stuck on the wall by James Moore on this show, who challenged me before the last election, warning New Democrats that when the public opinion about right track, wrong track was generally wrong track, it would be very hard for the premier to sustain right track or positive numbers indefinitely. And the premier made it through the election and has made it this far. But maybe this is a turning point. It'd be very interesting to see what follows next.
What's your gut, Leslie? What do you think? You've followed the polls much?
Well, someone brought this poll to my attention this morning in another meeting, and I think that it's definitely instructive, shall we say, to see how folks are responding to the premier, especially after the last couple of weeks. So, I mean, it's hard to say again whether this is a one poll wonder or whether this portends something greater. But I would also say, the Conservatives are still in a fair amount of disarray at this time, so it's a little bit surprising to see those numbers as well. So we'll see what happens.
It
Maybe
was not
voters
a
don't
great
care.
week.
Maybe
Oh,
voters
sorry.
don't care. There's array or disarray. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, but let's go back, Leslie, to last week, which in my view was admittedly a rough week for Premier Eby in the wake of his
Yeah.
belated disclosure that he was actually present at the signing of 3 agreements between the Musqueam and Canada, which he had said he had no idea about or didn't know what was in them. You make a good living telling people, giving people great advice between good political comms and bad political comms. Well, how did you see how the events unfolded? And is there any advice you would give the Premier's office about how to do better next time?
Well, I have lots I could say about this, Jeff. I've a couple of things
Please
that came
say
to
it.
mind. Yeah, a couple of things. A couple of things
The
came to mind.
podcast. That's what we do here.
Exactly. So, when I do media training, one of the things I often tell people is that about the risks of going off message. And one of those risks is that you can say something that maybe isn't 100% accurate, and then that becomes the focus. That becomes a story. And I think in this case, that's exactly what happened. And but I also think, I was thinking about Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, about the crash of the Korean airliner. And it wasn't a single error, but a number of errors that led to that disaster. And I think in this case,
He was shot down by a Soviet fighter, which led to big crisis. But yeah,
yeah. Well, but there were also a number of other factors that went into to that disaster as well. And I think that's the kind of the case here is that a lot of people made mistakes. It wasn't just the premier, quite frankly. I think that it appears he was caught unawares by this question at a different news conference that he had around daylight saving, and he gave an answer that was not accurate and led to a series of other events. So that's number one, you can't make up messages on the fly because they can bite you in the ass down the road. I think that a lot of people made mistakes here. Um, I, I don't see how you could go to a signing event like this and not ask to be briefed on what's happening there and what kind of communications could be happening between various levels of government. I I don't know why any senior staff, you have both been chief of staff at Premier, why you would send your Premier to an event without fully briefing them as well. And that may or may not be the case in this case. And also throwing staff under the bus. I mean, the buck stops with the Premier. And I think that a number of communications mistakes were made that led to a very, very bad week for the premier, as you put it. So, my advice, and it's for a lot of different people, don't go to a major event unless you absolutely know why you're there and the background circumstances around it. In this case, you had the premier's already made quite a big issue of the Cowichan decision and ruling, and also implied that he'll make amendments to the DRIPA legislation as a result of this. So why they wouldn't anticipate a similar or even bigger reaction to his attendance at this event and to these agreements is beyond me. So in that sense, I feel that it's a bit unforgivable. There are a number of people who made mistakes in this situation, and next time they need to do their homework and their due diligence before going into a situation like this.
It sounded like this could have been a situation where the constituency office had booked him into something because it was in his riding and their constituents, and the coordination between the PO and the constituency office may not have been very tight on that. Because I can see how sometimes, you turn the premier over to the, to the local office and to do all the local stuff. And, oh, hey, there's this thing going on with the Musqueam. There's still obviously should have been briefed and should have known what he was walking into. But I can see how sometimes there's those type of misalignments can happen.
Yeah, but as a former staffer, it was part of my job, when I worked for the Ministries of Finance and Education, part of my job when I went to an event with a minister or the premier was to brief them on the way, even if it was in the car, and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is who's going to be there. Here's the run of show, and create an opportunity, even if it's on the way to the events, to ask some basic questions. But clearly the premier was completely unprepared. But again, I would say that's unforgivable. He'd already been at the event. If he wasn't briefed beforehand, he should have been briefed afterwards, in my opinion.
The funny thing about it, to my way of, I agree with what you said, Leslie. I think also that the presence in the package of a map, which showed Musqueam interest historically, in an enormous swath of territory that covers 2/3 of the Lower Mainland and a big chunk, almost up to, well, certainly up to the end of Indian Arm and some of that area, was combined with the fact that there was a statement of recognition of Musqueam title within those territories to say, whoa, everybody in the Lower Mainland, all 2.3 million of us or whatever, are now going to be paying rent to the Musqueam, which is how it unfolded quite quickly.
Yes.
And so, I think it's possible to see all those errors accumulating, as you say, and in other days making no difference. But this wasn't one of those days. And the difference between what the premier said first, which is I wasn't briefed, I had no idea what was there, and then to have to concede that he actually was at the signing, was where everything went south, I think. And it's a real big warning sign how quickly that thing took off, in my opinion. It was really amazing. And I heard Wendy Grant John, who's the chief negotiator for the Musqueam, go through this in more detail on Stephen Quinn's program on CBC Radio. And, as you might expect, there was a quite straightforward explanation for what was there, but it was way after the fact and nobody was interested in explanations by then. So it's really poured gas on the controversy, I think, that we were already having about Indigenous rights.
Well, I agree. And again, the premier makes a lot of points about the priority he places on Indigenous relations and reconciliation. And I just don't see a circumstance where this particular event in his calendar shouldn't have drawn more attention to more people. And I really hope that everyone's going back and thinking about process around sending the premier to event in the future, because I think it was embarrassing for the premier and for a lot of other people as well.
The other story that happened last week that was terrible for someone in elected office was Mayor Karen Sim. In a nutshell, he was found to be the person who originally said that a councillor named Sean Orr had been selling or giving drugs away on Christmas Day to people with substance use disorders, which was totally false. Basing it on a photo, and I want to focus on this part and hear your reactions from both of you. So Jen St. Dennis, a reporter with the Thais, done a very interesting dig into deepfake AIs. And I think speculates with some reason, although the mayor can't say where the photo was. He refuses to say if a photo she found is the one that he was thinking of. But it's a deep fake, totally fake in all respects, but extremely legitimate looking. What are we going to do about deep fake AI used by third parties unknown in the course of politics? What kind of impact is it going to have? I think it's going to be very destabilizing personally, as it already has been for Ken Sim.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to put a lot of onus on accredited media to to try to demystify that for people. But even media can't police the internet, can't police social media. I do find like my 12-year-old daughter, will look at something on the internet, it might be something about cats or something, and she'll go like, "That's so AI," you know.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think the younger people might be more savvy to this than gullible old Geoff and Mike here. But there will be people taken in by it, and especially, I mean, there's been a lot of reports in the Iran war about all the deepfake stuff going on, where they're showing buildings burning. Turns out they were from Beirut 30 years ago, So, um, I guess the first line of defense is warn everybody that this is happening, and hopefully that they factor it in. But Leslie, do you have any good ideas on this one? I don't.
Well, I don't know. I mean, other than sort of some due diligence and asking some questions before you start sharing gossip with media or elsewhere. But maybe in this case that was a little bit deliberate, the Ken Sim case. But generally speaking, I think you're right. I think that this news travels so fast, faster than it can be debunked. And I think it's pretty dangerous for democracy in general, and certainly BC politics for sure. And I don't know if people are going to go to that next step of waiting for this information to be verified before they share it. I mean, arguably that's what happened in the City of Vancouver case as well. Is people heard a rumor, confirmed or otherwise, and they started to share it, and pretty soon it gets away from you. So. I think we should be very concerned. I think regulation, it has to be something that governments for sure start thinking about around this, because the technology is way ahead of the rest of us.
Well, I certainly remember talking to people who were working on a mayoral campaign in Toronto a number of years ago, where they were, veterans of the 24-hour news cycle, which was, a plodding dinosaur compared to today. And it wasn't that long ago. So if an issue broke, your team would sit down, they go, where is this coming from? How can we refute it? Who will validate our position? And all of that kind of work went on for
Yes.
what might have been a statement in a news conference that was hanging there.
Yeah.
But I noticed the other thing that I thought was interesting about the Mayor Sim thing was that the issue burbled away in Chinese language circles, both media and social media, for days before it was able to cross over into the
Yeah.
non-Chinese side, which is an important thing in itself. But also, as Jan St. Dennis points out, there are whole demographics of people watching and listening and consuming news that I will never see, partly because I just don't share their interests or views. And I think that makes it especially challenging
Yeah.
for political campaigns to try to manage this because we would get a picture like one BC has been circulating obviously fake AI pictures of three Indigenous leaders holding a glass of Prosecco over a mountain of cash. I
Mhm.
haven't seen what context they put it out in, but it's obviously not positive.
Mhm.
But it's clear it's fake as well. It's a political comment, like a cartoon practically. Excuse me, but that's not what happened to Sim. It's something else.
Yeah, I also think that just from a political party perspective is that the days of not paying attention to what's going on in Chinese or other non-English media are far from gone, and that every political organization should be upskilling their organizations to monitor these things so that they can get on top of them faster. So
Totally.
that really stood out for me, is that most of the other parties in Vancouver don't have strong enough connections in the Chinese community to even know what was happening.
Well, there's a whole conversation going on WeChat for the Chinese community, and there's a whole
Exactly.
conversation going on TikTok for especially younger people. And those are hard to track, those are hard to monitor, but they have high traction. Um, you know, not everyone, Geoff, not everyone's reading the Vancouver Sun every day
No,
Well,
that's for sure.
exactly.
on
And
paper.
making it sound like I'm plugging my media training again. I mean, the reality is a very small percentage of, I don't know, 20 or 30% of the public in this province is getting most of their news from mainstream media. Most people are getting their news elsewhere, certainly through the various social media channels. And there aren't sort of a low barrier to entry tools for regular people like us to monitor what's going on those different channels.
Mike, what's happening in the Conservative leadership race? Do you have any insights?
Well, I was just going to say that 37% of people are getting 92% of their news through Hotel Pacifico. So there you go. Um,
Luckily,
uh,
it's
I'd say that's a
reliable.
little optimistic, but okay.
um, a conservative leadership race. Well, it continues to burble on. They're about a month out or so from membership cutoff, and then leading to the ultimate announcement of the results on May 30th. Um, 9 candidates still in the race. They still have a few little hurdles to jump over in terms of putting their money down at certain intervals in the weeks ahead. Um, they're it's still, I mean, as far as my conventional wisdom here is it still seems like it's Caroline Elliott versus somebody. That might today be Peter Millibar, and the Black people might argue it's them. Then a whole raft of others are saying, "What about us? What about us?" But really don't know until we start seeing some evidence of membership sales, whether Carrie Lynn Finley or Harmon Bangu or Daryl Jones or the rest of them are making Yuri Fulmer are making a stronger bid from the outside of what's perceived as kind of the upper echelon of the race. So we'll have to watch that. But there was a little activity this week, you noted, Jeff, an event, I think it was at UBC, wasn't it? Where there was a bit
I
of,
wasn't sure where it was.
yeah, there was a lot of shouting and hollering from protesters who didn't like the cut of the conservative jib, so to speak. The MP Jamal Giovanni was out along with Aaron Gunn, and I think a few leadership contenders were there too. Harmon Bangu and I think Daryl Jones was there. There might have been some others there too. But it does show kind of some of the polarization on campus, anyways, around some of these uh, policy debates.
Mhm. I look at Aaron Gunn and I see him as somebody that everybody wants to be in the same picture with.
Yeah.
He has a massive social media following, and obviously was one of those people vetted out by BC United um,
BC Liberals,
before
yeah.
they disappeared. And so he's there as a factor. You
Just to
see
be
him
clear, Aaron Gunn wanted to run as a BC Liberal. That was that.
BC Liberal. That's
Just,
right.
just,
Sorry.
just,
Good point.
just. I don't want anyone to forget
Good
that.
point. And the fact that he was shunned triggered him to join the Conservatives. But
Yes.
he's now Carolyn Elliott had a picture taken with him, and he certainly was a presence at that rally, I think at UBC. But he certainly Herman Bangu was at some event. I can't keep track of it, and I'm only watching a fraction of the social media content that's out there about the Conservatives. And he is a friend of Aaron Gunn and has been for a long time. So I think people are hoping to have fame by association with Aaron Gunn, and we'll see how that plays out
Yeah, it
in the
might even
final vote.
be more than that. Because Harmon said a few months ago that if Aaron didn't run, he would, but if Aaron ran, he would support him.
That's right. Yeah.
And Harmon, friend of the show, I should say. But Harmon
And Aaron.
and Aaron, friend of the show, and Aisha Esty,
And
friend of the
Caroline,
show, were all the original. Like when Aaron got turfed out of the race of the BC Liberals, they took their marbles and went and got busy on the BC Conservatives. And so Harmon was very much on the ground floor of that with Aaron and Aisha. And the rest is history, right? So now the question is, okay, how much of that matters? How much of the you were there on the ground floor political purity test, um, you know, versus let's open the doors to this thing to business community and others around BC to turn this into more of a free enterprise coalition vehicle that can just go and beat the NDP and don't get so hung up on
yeah.
all these
Yeah.
crazy ideas, right? And
That's
that's
my question is
yeah.
like, which way is it going to go? Is it going to be like the former BC Liberals, BC United folks that build that coalition? Because in my opinion, that's the only way the Conservatives can win, notwithstanding recent polling results. But if they lean to that right wing of the party, I think they're going to end up in the same place that they are now, or even worse. So, I mean, that's my question: is who's going to come out on top in that internal tension?
Well, I think Angelo Isidoro said something that really stuck with me because he said polarization is the way to go. That was his political strategy.
Yeah.
I believe he said it on Moamir. He might have said it elsewhere, but he certainly said it very consciously and deliberately. And I think it was reflected in the way that they ran the Conservatives. And you're right, Leslie. We'll see what happens next. But I think the forces of polarization are very, very strong.
Yes.
And Carolyn Elliott is not presenting herself to the membership of the Conservatives as someone who will steer us back towards the BC
Yeah.
Liberals. I don't think that's what she's saying at all. So it'll be very interesting to see. What about some of the voters who would have been with the NDP, but are now getting annoyed for various reasons, the budget or whatever? Do you think they would go back to the Conservatives, Leslie, or are there some barriers for people like that that just make it impossible?
I think that there are a few issues that people on that would otherwise occupy that sort of center right space. There are a few issues that they can't, some Rubicons they can't cross, whether it's LGBTQ, transgender rights, whether it's human rights when it comes to getting rid of the human rights code, et cetera. So I do think there are a few issues that would make it hard for a more centrist voter to vote conservative. But I do think that the fact that the NDP is struggling at a time when, as I said earlier, I feel like the Conservatives are still in disarray. They definitely haven't got their stuff together yet. That might be where they're going, but they're not there yet. It's really hard to say whether the NDP can hang on to that vote. And so I think it would be very disappointing for me to see a repeat of the last provincial election.
What is the argument, though, that the Conservatives are in disarray compared to the NDP being in disarray? Like,
well,
on the disarray index.
On the disarray index, well,
like where are those
currently
parties? Are they really
well,
that far apart on the disarray index?
I don't think you have to. I need to remind either of you about how the Rustad leadership came to an abrupt end. But they don't have a leader right now. And again, I do think people might want to downplay it, but I do think there's a strong internal tension within the Conservative Party for dominance, that sort of radical right wing and that sort of former BC Liberal. And so, I mean, it really depends, in my opinion, who emerges as dominant in that internal struggle. But right now, they do not have a center of gravity, in my opinion, the Conservative Party. So that would traditionally be an advantage for the governing party. And I'm just I'm not sure how this is all going to play out.
Well, I think we've pioneered the disarray index here today.
Okay.
I'm going to do a shout out to another former chief of staff, Matt Smith, that maybe Matt can come up with a polling question that does the disarray index, and we can settle this. We can settle this.
We could do an annual report on the level
annual
of disarray
index of all political parties in BC.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is total disarray and 10 is well-oiled machine, where do you think the NDP is? Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
totally.
right now I'd say
that's
they're
a
about
good
4.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they're a well-oiled machine exactly right now.
I don't think so.
I'm just
either.
proposing a scale on which you could rank disarray. That's all.
But I think you have to have disarray.
I'm down.
But you also
wanna be
have to
part of
have maybe opportunity or something like that. Like you can have disarray, but sometimes it doesn't matter.
Yes,
if your time for change is like crazy, right?
That is true, but I think you're giving the Conservatives a little too much credit, at least so far. Again, we'll see how this leadership plays out. But right now, I don't think they have their business together, and it's opportunity should the NDP choose to accept it to get their business together.
Okay, so Matt Smith, Dan Arnold, all the smart pollsters in my life. Disarray index.
There should be a woman in there somewhere.
We're going
I think.
Kyla,
there must be a talented female pollster.
Kyla Renault Fitch, who's the co-host of Culture Lab, an air quotes podcast. Very talented young pollster. So yes, we can bring Kyla into that too. So that'd be perfect. Okay. Hey, Geoff, did you buy some oil futures last week?
No, I'm not we actually have a plug-in car. I'm a downtown progressive. I don't have to worry about oil prices anymore, but they seem to go sharply up, even higher than they can't, they never did come down after the carbon tax was eliminated, something I was watching for quite closely, but now they've gone up about 4 or 5 times what the carbon tax would have been if it was still in place. But is it a political problem, Leslie? Anybody paying any attention?
Well, I don't know if oil per se is going to be the issue,
It's
but
a pump.
affordability for sure.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's going to affect, as you both know, it's going to affect.
Might rev that
It's
issue up again a bit.
Well, exactly. Inflation is going to go up, and I think people care more about the grocery store bill, and I mean, those people who drive certainly care about the pump, but I think it's going to be a broader discussion of increased pressure on cost of living. I think that's where this is going to land, both regionally and nationally.
Yeah.
I think the saliva index of those slobbering for a new oil pipeline will go up as well as a result of the oil prices.
Well, as you know, they can be built, in a few months, so
Yeah, so
no problem.
That drumbeat's going to get even louder because I mean
I know.
the perceived business case will increase as with global instability, and especially I don't know when this whole Iran war is going to get wrapped up. Geoff, I don't know if you have any insight on that.
No.
You've been out to the Straits of Hormuz lately, but that stuff just adds to, I think, support for Canada doing things that strengthens Canada and maybe takes advantage of a global opportunity.
Well, and Geoff and I would argue, Mr. Electric Car over there, that this is also an opportunity for clean energy growth. I mean, I think ultimately it's a great business case for the clean energy transition because we can't be subjected to these global shocks long term, and so yeah, I think there's opportunity on both sides, on both the clean energy and
I've never seen why we can't do it all. Like, why
yeah.
can't we should do it all, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's
Yeah.
have more electricity, let's have more exports, let's pay down the deficit, which will take most of our lives to do.
But I think in brief, though, the numbers for if the oil prices are up for a sustained period of time, it'll mean Danielle Smith's deficit will be much smaller.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make the same difference here, unfortunately, and because one of the questions that I guess historians can go back and think over is whether or not the cancellation of the carbon tax without any substitute was a turning point in the future of the EB government, given where it stands now with deficit issues. So we'll see.
Wow.
But I think we should go to the minibar. I'm ready for a drink. All this bad news.
Leslie, did you come prepared?
No.
Oh,
No?
well, you have to raise a glass or take a shot in the minibar.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go first, and you can.
Okay.
I'll start. I'm going to take a shot at BC Ferries. I might be taking a shot at another friend of the show, a couple friends of the show, because I think Joy McPhail's the chair of BC Ferries, isn't she?
Yeah. It's not too late to change your mind.
Is Eric Denoff on the board too? I think he might be.
I'm not sure if that's true anymore.
Well, if he is or isn't, hopefully they can have some influence. Another friend of the show, Daniel Marshall, historian Daniel Marshall, took umbrage this week with the fact that BC Ferries is trying to minimize bookshelf space for BC books. And he, among many, are pointing out the importance of that bookshelf space to BC authors, including the venerable Howard White, who is a legend in BC book publishing, has raised the alarm bell on this, ringing the alarm bell on this. So I say, come on, BC Ferries. Like, I know you want to sell more, scarves or mittens or whatever you sell in the gift shops, but this is the fabric of the province. We're telling the stories of British Columbia. There's a wide variety of BC books that are on those shelves. I buy books off of there all the time. I didn't buy George Abbott's, though. I thought I'd just interview him on the podcast. But there's lots of books there. It's a great way. It's a perfect way for the province. I know BC Ferries is not part of the provincial government, but it's a perfect way to promote ourselves. We should be using our provincial assets to do just that. Instead of writing a check to the culture industry to do stuff, let's actually help them promote it so that people will buy it. So come on, BC Ferries, come to your senses.
Yeah. This goes way, way back. It's really an important thing they do. I'll raise a glass to that. or
You're going to
whatever,
raise a glass to
shot.
my shot?
Yeah, I'll raise a
Raise
glass to your
okay.
shot.
Okay, very good.
Okay, I've got a plate of humble pie here to eat, bit of crow, because last week I toasted Bill Thielman for shots he took at Avi Lewis, the NDP leadership candidate, and Bill had a big error in there, which I won't repeat. But people following my comments should know that Avi Lewis contributed to the NDP both under Avi Lewis and Avram Lewis, and I didn't tell the full story, so I apologize unreservedly to Avi Lewis for repeating the falsehoods that were uttered by Bill Thielman, which I didn't catch up to until after we recorded.
Which Bill has apologized for. I believe.
Yeah, Bill also apologized. So I don't want anybody feeling there was false news here willingly, so I'm apologizing. And I also want to raise a glass, though, to longtime journalist Frances Beulah, who has suddenly shaken up the civic race in Vancouver by deciding to end her, 40-year career in journalism. She's had many careers, but to run as a candidate for city council with one city. And it certainly caused a big stir. And I think will do a lot of good to the race because she has covered municipal politics for many, many years and really knows what she's talking about, especially about housing. So here's a glass to Frances Beulah.
Okay, Leslie, now that we've warmed you up, do you have a...
Yeah, I'll raise a glass to that. I think she'll bring a lot of knowledge and spice to the civic campaign that many of the opposition politicians will find it hard to avoid. I think I would like to raise a glass to Housing Minister Christine Boyle, who introduced amendments to the Residential Tenancy Act last week that strengthen the ability of supportive housing operators to manage issues within their buildings. You might have been aware that there was a very tragic murder in a supportive housing building here in Victoria a few months ago. And one of the issues that operators brought up at that time is that they can't ban weapons. And the minister at the time, Ravi Kahlon, had said, well, we already have weapons bans, but because police were not able to support those issues, they couldn't be enforced. And so really just want to commend the minister for listening to the supportive housing providers. They deal with some of the most challenging folks, and they want to be the people housing those folks, but they needed some backup, and the government actually gave it to them. So kudos to Christine Boyle.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, well, busy week in BC politics as usual. Thanks so much, Leslie, for joining us for Strategy Suite.
Oh, my pleasure.
Bring us your insights and long experience on the good and the bad of political communications. Thanks to Scott Lenny also for joining us this week, and to our sponsors for allowing us to bring you this episode for free. So we'll see you next week. BC, you can never leave.